AITA for refusing to redo my wedding after my mom skipped it for a birthday. My mother has always shown favoritism toward my older brother, Brandon, over me. I cannot exactly pinpoint what makes Brandon her favorite, but she has adored him since our childhood and never hid this fact from me. When I was born, just 1 year after Brandon, my parents decided to entrust me to my grandparents to raise me for 8 years. My mother found it too overwhelming to take care of both me and Brandon at the same time. According to my grandparents, my mother was going through postpartum depression, which made it difficult for her to care for both of us. My grandparents did not resist much when my mother wanted to hand me over to them. They understood the severity of her condition, and my father could not take care of me alone while working full-time. As a baby, I did not know that my grandparents were not my real parents. I grew up in their loving and happy home in our quiet suburban neighborhood in the Midwest, feeling safe and content. However, when I started walking and understanding words, things began to change. My parents would sometimes drive over for visits. During these visits, they explained that they were my real parents and that my stay at my grandparents' house was only temporary. These visits were always bittersweet and confusing for me. On one hand, I was excited to see my parents, but on the other hand, I felt a sense of confusion and abandonment. I would see my parents spend 2 or 3 hours with me playing and talking, but then they would say goodbye and leave, taking Brandon with them in their car. This pattern repeated, and it became clear to me that Brandon was always their priority. Although my grandparents gave me all the love and care possible, my parents' brief visits left me feeling worthless. Finally, when I turned 8, my parents brought me back to our family home in the same suburban area. At first, I was excited to return to my family and finally be reunited with them. However, the excitement slowly faded when I realized how much better my life had been with my grandparents. One of the first changes I had to adapt to was sharing a room with Brandon. Brandon had always had his own room, and there was a spare bedroom that my parents could have given me. Instead, they insisted that Brandon and I share a room so that we could bond as brothers. Brandon hated this new arrangement and made it very clear. If I played too loudly or read comic books that my grandparents had bought me, Brandon would make fun of me, calling me a brat and a weirdo. Every time I tried to decorate my side of the room with drawings or posters of my favorite superheroes, Brandon would mock me and call me a child. If I brought home a good grade from school and excitedly showed it to my parents, Brandon would roll his eyes and sarcastically call me a teacher's pet. When I practiced on the keyboard my grandparents had given me, Brandon would tell me that I played horribly and that I should give up. Even little things like how I organized my toys or how I talked about my day became reasons for Brandon to make fun of me. He would call me a nerd or stupid every time I showed interest in reading or learning something new. Over time, I realized that the things I loved doing were becoming points of conflict. Brandon had a problem with everything I did, and he made me feel uncomfortable. Imagine having an older brother, someone you are supposed to look up to, who mocks you for every little thing. It makes you doubt yourself. I was too young to understand that what he was doing was basically bullying. I thought maybe I was the problem, and I just wanted to fit into my family. I stopped reading my comic books at home and only read them at the school library. I completely stopped playing the keyboard. I did all this hoping that my brother would accept me if I changed. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried to fit in, Brandon's attitude toward me did not improve. The more I tried to please him, the more I felt like I was losing parts of myself. Even when I stopped doing all those things that annoyed him, he found new ways to make fun of me. I remember that during my childhood, I had a lot of acne due to a skin condition that has since been treated. Brandon constantly told me how ugly I was and that my face was disgusting. Hearing that was so painful that I would cry and go to my parents for help. Instead of supporting me and reprimanding Brandon, my mother told me to stop crying and be a man. My father was not much help either. He tried not to get involved. My mother told me that I needed to stand up for myself against my brother instead of coming to her. Because of Brandon's bullying and my parents' inability to make me feel safe and loved, I felt confused and isolated. I dreamed of returning to the warm environment I had with my grandparents, where I always felt valued and understood. My grandparents came to visit me whenever they could, driving over from their house. When they did, they tried to speak gently to Brandon and tell him not to bother me, but he never listened to them. So, most of the time, I was left on my own to handle things at home. Growing up, I slowly became a very angry teenager. Although Brandon was older than me, I was growing taller than him, and he did not like that at all. He made fun of my height, calling me a giant or slender man to annoy me. However, this time, instead of asking my parents for help, I started standing up for myself by calling him a shrimp. I also hid his books on the top shelf so he could not reach them without a chair. This gave me a reason to mock him. He would complain to our parents, and sometimes they scolded me. I always felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt for defending myself. Although it felt good to stand up for myself, it also made our home an even more hostile environment. The fights between us became more frequent and intense, and neither of us was willing to back down. The final straw that showed me just how much my parents favored my brother over me happened during the annual awards ceremony at my high school. I had poured my heart into my studies and was about to receive the most prestigious award in my class. I wanted my parents' support and presence at the ceremony, hoping for their pride and encouragement. However, a few days before the ceremony, my mother informed me that Brandon had a swimming competition scheduled on the same day. Even though my ceremony and his competition took place at different times, Brandon wanted to focus on his preparation, and according to my mother, he needed her more. She assured me that my father would be there to support me. Although disappointed, I accepted that at least one parent would be there for me. On the day of the ceremony, I was surprised to find that even my father had not come. At the last minute, my mother had called him in an emergency, saying that Brandon was having a panic attack before his competition and needed him there to calm him down. My father chose to rush to Brandon instead of coming to my awards ceremony. When I walked on stage to receive my award, I remember seeing no familiar faces in the audience cheering for me. Later, when I got home, neither my parents nor Brandon were there. I called them only to find out they were still with Brandon. It took hours before they came home, jubilant and celebrating Brandon's victory in his competition. I was holding a trophy in my hands while they told me how well my brother had done. They hugged him tightly and praised his accomplishments as if it were the most important event of the year. I could not help but feel jealousy and pain at that moment. My parents did not even apologize for missing my ceremony. It was a harsh realization of where I stood in my parents' priorities. Despite all my efforts and achievements, I was always in the shadows, never appreciated compared to Brandon. This entire experience became a turning point. I stopped asking my parents for help or hoping they would be present. I stopped thinking I could rely on them. Every time I did something well in school or in sports, I no longer bothered telling them. The only people I could speak freely to about my successes were my grandparents, and they always appreciated me, even for the little things. Their words meant more to me than any recognition I could ever receive from my parents. When Brandon finished high school and was accepted into college, my parents threw a huge party. They were full of pride, bragging about his achievements to everyone and organizing a party in his honor at a local hall. I joined in congratulating my brother because I was genuinely happy for him. A year later, when I finished high school and was accepted into college, my parents did nothing of the sort. Seeing this, my grandparents wanted to celebrate my success by organizing a small gathering with relatives and a few of my high school friends at their house. What was originally planned as a modest event grew larger when many other family members and friends expressed their desire to join us to show me their support. However, my parents disapproved, feeling that this celebration was excessive. They thought I did not deserve such a lavish event, especially since my grandparents had not done the same thing for Brandon when he graduated. I admit that the party my grandparents were organizing for me was indeed more lavish than my brother's at the time, but I wished my parents would let me have one day without complaining. My mother argued that Brandon would feel very bad if he found out our grandparents were throwing me a party, especially considering they had only given him a watch back then. My grandfather, visibly upset, reminded my mother how he and my grandmother always had to step in to support and celebrate me because my parents never did. He pointed out how enthusiastically my parents had celebrated Brandon's achievements while seeming indifferent to mine. My grandmother shared his feelings, questioning the double standard in celebrating their children's successes. In response, my parents defended themselves, arguing that it was difficult to find a balance between the celebrations for both children and that their attention naturally shifted to Brandon's milestones more since he was the eldest. They claimed it was hard to do everything equally for both. My mother added that the fact they did not celebrate me enough did not mean they did not love me, which was laughable to hear. Fortunately, My grandfather felt the same way and was unconvinced. He passionately replied that a parent's role is to be there for both their children, not just one. He criticized my parents for not treating me with the same enthusiasm and support they always showed Brandon. Ultimately, my parents ran out of arguments to defend themselves, and I ended up having a big party just as my grandparents wanted. I invited Brandon to attend, but he said he was too busy to come to a ridiculous little party. For years, my parents continued to show their favoritism toward Brandon, even when we were in college. This was particularly obvious in the way they treated us and our partners. While Brandon and his girlfriend were always warmly welcomed at family gatherings, I felt increasingly excluded. This was especially clear during the yearly invitations my parents sent to Brandon and his girlfriend without fail. However, after I introduced them to my girlfriend, suddenly my parents had concerns that their dinner would become too crowded if they also invited Rachel. What made the situation even worse was the way my parents viewed and spoke about my girlfriend. Despite her impressive academic achievements and successful career, they always found reasons to criticize her, which made me very angry. Meanwhile, Brandon's girlfriend, who did not work and relied on alimony from her ex-husband, was never questioned or judged in the same way. My mother's comments were especially hurtful. She once openly told me that she would have preferred I find a more traditional type of girl rather than someone like my girlfriend who was so focused on her career. She even suggested that Rachel would not be a good mother for my children. Despite her comments, I continued my relationship because I believed in my girlfriend and in our future together. I even stopped attending family dinners and annual Christmas events to avoid giving my parents a reason to criticize my girlfriend. I do not think my absence affected my parents much. Now, getting to the main story of why I am on Reddit today. 6 months ago, I asked Rachel to marry me, and she said yes. I had no doubt that she was the woman of my life. This woman has given me so much love and support over the years that I cannot imagine my life without her. When I informed my parents of our engagement out of courtesy, wanting them to hear the news from me rather than someone else, I received mixed reactions. My father seemed truly happy for me and congratulated me, while my mother remained silent. Later, my mother sent me a message to express her disappointment. She told me she was disappointed that I had not listened to her and proposed to Rachel anyway. She claimed that as a woman, she knew other women better and thought Rachel would not fit well into our family. I was stunned and told her to stop bothering me because I was tired of her always criticizing my relationship. I asked her if she had a legitimate reason not to like Rachel or if it was just unfounded prejudice. Then, my mother replied by saying that Rachel always stood up to her, unlike my brother's girlfriend. That statement left me speechless. It is true that Rachel did not let herself be walked over in the past. Every time my mother tried to subtly mock her studies, her clothing, or her career choice, Rachel never let her get away with it. That is one of the things I admire about Rachel. She always defends herself. She is aware of my family's history and, unlike me, she does not hesitate to confront my mother. However, Rachel has never been directly disrespectful. Her responses are usually witty and sarcastic. But obviously, my mother has hated Rachel all this time because of that. It became clear to me that my mother's problem with Rachel was not based on any actual behavior or character flaw, but rather on an outdated notion of how she expected a woman to behave. That is why I told my mother that I did not think Rachel was wrong about anything, and that I wished I was as assertive as her. My mother replied that Rachel was a bad influence, and that she was changing me too much. I paid little attention to my mother's criticisms and enthusiastically continued planning my wedding with Rachel. 2 months ago, I sent wedding invitations to everyone, including my brother Brandon. Although I received no congratulations from Brandon after the engagement, I held no grudges and sent him an invitation to my wedding. To my great surprise, Brandon declined the invitation without giving an explanation. That disappointed me a little, but what really surprised me was when my father called to inform me that, although he would attend the wedding, my mother had decided not to come. I knew my mother had reservations about Rachel, but I hoped that for the sake of our family and this special day, she would put her differences aside and join us. I was shocked and asked why. My father explained that Brandon had apparently organized a birthday party for his girlfriend on the same day, and that my mother would attend it instead of my wedding. This revelation was strange because I followed Brandon on social media and knew they had recently celebrated her birthday. I could not understand why they would organize another party on the exact day of my wedding. Instead of confronting my mother first, I decided to contact Brandon directly to clear things up. Even though we did not talk often, I wanted to handle the situation with respect and dignity. I called Brandon and asked him directly about the birthday party and if that was really the reason he was not planning to attend my wedding. To my surprise, Brandon confirmed that it was indeed the case. He explained that he and his girlfriend originally wanted to celebrate her birthday with a party, but he did not have enough money at the time. So Brandon admitted he had worked hard to make it up to his girlfriend by finding a special place for their celebration that fit their budget. Unfortunately, the only available date for this venue coincided with my wedding day. I expressed my disappointment and gently suggested that he could have chosen another date. I insisted that I would have greatly appreciated his presence at my wedding. However, Brandon replied that his girlfriend's happiness came above all else, and he made it very clear that he was not willing to change the date of the birthday party just to accommodate my wedding plans. Those words hurt me, and I hung up before he could respond further. Later, when I called my mother to discuss the situation, she brought up the same old explanation she always gave me. She insisted that Brandon would be hurt if she did not attend his birthday party and reiterated that my father was already planning to attend my wedding, so I should not be selfish and expect her to come too. I explained to her that she could do whatever she wanted, but from now on I no longer considered her my mother. My mother scoffed at my words and told me not to be so dramatic about my wedding. After the confrontation with my mother regarding her refusal to attend my wedding, I decided to completely cut off communication with her. My main goal was to ensure that Rachel had the most beautiful wedding possible and that our celebration was filled with joy and love. Despite my disappointment in my mother, I was grateful that my father kept his promise and stood by my side on this special day. When Rachel and I finally got married, my grandparents, who had already anticipated my mother's absence despite their pleas, were naturally upset and disappointed. They had even warned my mother in advance, stressing the importance of her presence. The fact that she still chose not to come deeply affected them. What made things worse was when my brother posted photos after his birthday party where my mother could be seen dancing and enjoying herself as if it were the party of the century. My mother never called either Rachel or me to see how we were doing or to congratulate us during the entire day. After the wedding, my grandparents did not hesitate to confront my mother about her absence. They did not hold back. They clearly told her they had had enough of the way she had mistreated me for years. They said they had given her more than enough chances to be a good mother, but she obviously only wanted Brandon. They went as far as threatening her with consequences, including the possibility of cutting her out of any inheritance. When my mother tried to defend herself by saying Brandon's party was just as important, they announced to her that they would make sure I received every last penny of their inheritance because I deserved it more than she did. That was a big deal coming from my grandparents and completely unexpected. After their confrontation, my mother called me begging for forgiveness. During our brief conversation, she lamented about how unfair it would be if I inherited my grandparents' money instead of her. She begged me to convince them not to make any decisions regarding their estate. Obviously, she was more concerned about the inheritance than about fixing our relationship. So I did not engage too much in the conversation because I was on my honeymoon and wanted to keep my good mood. Plus, I was waiting for Rachel to get ready to go to the beach. When she told me she was ready, I hung up. However, lately, after my return from the honeymoon, she calls me almost every day, begging for another chance to fix things between us. She suggested that Rachel and I should organize another wedding, this time just with close family if possible, so she could attend. She expressed regrets about missing my wedding and insists that I should give her the opportunity to redeem herself. Furthermore, out of nowhere, Brandon sent me a message saying that I should not have involved our grandparents in our private affairs and that Mom is really scared of losing her inheritance. He said that for her sake, I should organize another wedding just to restore peace in our family. I still do not understand how they came up with the idea that I should organize another wedding just to solve their problems. Update 1. I talked to Rachel about all this, and she agrees that organizing another wedding would be too complicated and pointless. She thinks I should stand firm with my mother and tell her that she had the opportunity to attend our original wedding but chose not to go, and she now has to live with that decision. I want to clarify a few points. First, despite the favoritism I experienced from my parents, especially from my mother toward my brother, I hold no hatred toward him. I understand that he observed and learned from the way our parents treated us differently. Although my mother clearly favored him, I think he took advantage of that dynamic. As an adult, I prefer to address and resolve our problems rather than harbor resentment. However, it seems my brother continues to behave immaturely and enjoys playing childish games. Second, my grandparents have in fact decided to leave their entire inheritance to me, not to my mother or Brandon. Our close bond developed because they practically raised me, and they want to make sure I am taken care of regardless of how my parents support Brandon in the future. There is also no one else in the picture, so they do not have many people to leave it to. Finally, it is important to note that my mother was criticized by other family members besides my grandparents for not attending my wedding. Despite her disappointment, she initially seemed indifferent to their concerns. It was only after my grandparents decided to change their inheritance plan that she began to change her approach, pressuring me to organize another wedding so she could attend. Update 2. It's official. My grandfather just informed me that he and my grandmother have written new wills naming me the sole heir and removing my mother from everything. Although I expected this outcome, it still surprised me. My grandfather explained that their decision was not only influenced by the way my mother treated me, but also by their belief that I would take better care of them in their old age than my mother would. They trust that I will not abandon them in a care facility unless it is absolutely necessary, and they are confident in my ability to manage their finances responsibly. Whatever their reason, I am grateful and moved by the deep love my grandparents have shown me with this decision. It is a striking contrast to how I often felt less prioritized by my own parents. As you can imagine, this news was not well received by my mother. She calls me incessantly and sends me messages accusing me of blindsiding her and claiming that I have no right to her parents' inheritance. It is true what they say, money really changes people. She seems to think I am stealing something from her when I have not even received anything yet. When I firmly suggested she speak directly to my grandparents to express her concerns, she accused me of manipulating the situation to win their favor. I reminded her that any change in their will was a direct consequence of her own actions over the years. Our argument became heated, and in a moment of raw honesty, or perhaps bitterness, she confessed something deeply hurtful. She said she wished I had never been born. She revealed that I was an unplanned pregnancy and blamed me for her postpartum depression. She admitted that she had considered putting me up for adoption just to get rid of me, but backed out because of her parents' conservative views. She confessed that she loved Brandon more because he had always been easier for her. Those words hurt me deeply, but I told her that I appreciated her honesty because it freed me from the guilt I felt about our strained relationship. I made it very clear to her that I did not want to continue a cycle of arguments and hurtful exchanges anymore, and that I just wanted to live my life in peace. I firmly asked her not to contact me again and warned her that I would involve the police if she showed up at my house uninvited. After that conversation with my mother, I contacted my father. He acknowledged that part of what my mother had said about my unplanned pregnancy and her struggles with postpartum depression was true, but he assured me that he had never regretted my birth. I expressed to him how much the favoritism toward my brother had hurt me over the years, and he sincerely apologized. Although I am not sure about the future of my relationship with my father, I asked for space for now, and he respected my decision. As for Brandon, I sent him a long message explaining that he could have been a better and more mature older brother to me, especially considering how much I looked up to him my whole life. I confided in him that I had felt incredibly lonely growing up with our grandparents, and that I had so desperately wanted his acceptance when I moved in with our parents. I made it clear to him that I had never harbored any resentment toward him and that instead of competing with me, he could have chosen to be a supportive part of my life. I also expressed my disappointment in him as a big brother and announced to him that I was ending our relationship. Since then, I have blocked him and currently have no plans to unblock him in the near future. I am focusing on building a beautiful future with my wife, Rachel. It is true that I am grateful to have such a strong and determined woman by my side. Her support and love have been crucial in my life, and with her next to me, I feel confident facing any challenges to come. Update 3. It has been maybe 4 or 5 months since my last update, but here is what is new in my life. I have not heard much about my brother since he is blocked, and my relatives have not told me much either. I guess nothing significant has happened in his life. As for my father, I have not spoken to him during all this time either. I do not feel like I miss him, and I do not think I need to maintain a relationship with him either. Some people in the comments mentioned that he was also part of this whole situation, and they are right. That is why I have not spoken to him again. As for my mother, she has made posts about me on social media. Every time she does, I unblock her and comment to explain how things really happened, then I block her again. The funny thing is that my posts get more likes than hers, so I know people are on my side. Many even reply to her posts for me, so I do not even have to worry about it myself. My grandparents have also stopped talking to them, and I see them every weekend when my wife and I drive over to their house for dinner. Comment: I really hope this story resonated with you as much as it did with me. Sometimes, protecting our own peace is the most important decision we can make. Setting healthy boundaries with family is not selfish, but an act of self-respect. You deserve to be chosen and valued every single day, not just when it's convenient for others. True healing often begins the moment we stop chasing approval from those who can't give it freely. I'm always reminded how powerful it is to surround ourselves with people who genuinely support us. It's okay to choose calm over constant drama in our relationships. Treating others with the kindness and consistency we wish we had received is something worth striving for. No matter what you've been through, never forget that your well-being matters. Building a life with someone who truly has your back can change everything for the better. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.